right, starting with the temptations today. Hello, welcome, good afternoon. Welcome to another Wayne Risa Summer Learning Blitz session. This one is, as you see on the screen, making space for youth-centered, youth-led writing in classrooms and schools. This is the last of a 6-part series during the Summer Learning Blitz that we've held, exploring Dr. Kimberly Parker's Literacy is Liberation, and that its connection to the Literacy Essentials for grades 4 and 5 and grades 6 through 12. We've been honored really to present Dr. Parker's work as a guide to the culturally responsive implementation of the essential practices. And we hope that those of you that have been along with us for some or all of the sessions have enjoyed it too. And if you're new to us, we hope that you'll enjoy this session. Real quick, we're going to see who's in the room today. Feel free to drop your name, your district, and something that you're looking forward to in the 2022-2023 school year in the chat, so that we can know who's in the room. That's always a good feeling to know who's here. Laura and I have been also spamming the sign-in link. You can use the QR code on the screen. You can also use the link in the chat. They go to the same place, but please do remember to sign in so that you can get your hours for your certificate renewal. All right. Well, you are introducing yourself this afternoon. We'll briefly introduce ourselves. My name is Jeff Austin. I use he, him, his pronouns, and I'm a literacy consultant at RISA. And I'm co-piloting today with my colleague, Laura. And Laura, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. I hope you're having a great day. Thank you for indulging me in listening to the Temptations. I'm going to see the play Ain't Too Proud tonight, so I had to get myself in the mode. So I appreciate that indulgence, but looking forward to our last session with all of you. And I'm loving seeing where you guys are coming from as you're placing that into the chat.
And as we're thinking about that, Pete says in Livonia, normalcy is a hope. And Dwight from Wayne Westland is here. Also, Angela is here from DPSCD and thinking about emerging student leaders. Thanks, everybody. That's great. Welcome. Okay. We are zooming to you today from Wayne Risa, which is located in the ancestral homeland of the Anishinaabe, Ottawa, Ojibwe, Potawatomi, Wyandot, Peoria, and Fox tribes. We encourage you to visit nativeland.ca to learn more about the land that you live on, and for those of us that aren't members of Indigenous groups, how to be co-conspirators for a better future with Indigenous people moving forward. We believe that acknowledgement, continued education, and dedicated action are part of our collective liberation. And if this series is about anything, it is about that collective liberation. One way to get involved in learning more about Indigenous people and how to include them in your curriculum is to join the 2022 Indigenous Peoples Day curriculum teach-in, which is happening on Saturday, October 1st from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. Rebecca Nagel will be the keynote speaker this year. If you want more information about that, you can go to Teaching for Justice, and it's on the front page. All right. Again, we are going to talk a little bit about today's agenda. We have a brief time together this afternoon, only about 75 minutes. So here's what we're going to do today. Talk about a little bit about the rationale. Some of that will be familiar to you if you've been with us before, but new to others. We'll talk about some of our values and working agreements. We'll talk about finding joy and purpose in writing. Joy sometimes doesn't always go with writing, but we hope to change the equation today. We'll put the literacy essentials into action. We'll talk about what it means to write for real and engage students in what we're going to call renewable assignments, not disposable ones. We'll look at a couple of exemplars. We'll do some breakout sessions toward the end, and then we'll have a little bit of time for a closing reflection. All right. As this is the last installment of this series, we wanted to revisit our Wayne Risa Equity Team video to share with you once again what drives our practices and to encourage you and those that might be around you and those that might be watching us later on video to think about theirs. Throughout our series together, we've really highlighted an expansive, inclusive view of literacy that's actionable, liberatory, humanizing, and evolving. As we play this short video, we're going to ask that you consider what affirms your current practices and what might invite your growth for the coming school year. If you've been with us throughout the series, we'd ask that you consider your consider if your responses have changed, if they've deepened, or if they've been revised at all throughout the learning that we've shared over the last 3 weeks. And if you're new to us, we ask that you be honest and vulnerable with yourself. And we're going to encourage you to find those edges, those things that might be a bit uncomfortable or unwelcome, and push through them and lean into them to continue your growth. We believe that adults, like students, have amazing potential to grow, change, evolve, and learn. And I think I speak for Laura when I say we wouldn't be in this job if we didn't believe that were true. So here's the video. We'll talk to you in about 2 minutes and 50 seconds.
We, the Wayne Risa Literacy Team, continue to explore, learn, and collaborate with one another in an effort to advance literacy practices that promote equity, diversity, inclusion, and anti-racist. To that end, we have crafted beliefs and commitments to advancing this work. We believe literacy is actionable, liberatory, and humanizing. We believe robust interdisciplinary literacy instruction empowers students' voice and agency to enact positive change. We believe equitable literacy instruction connects to students' identities by linking literacy to their histories and cultures while developing their skills, intellect, criticality, and joy. We believe equitable literacy practices are not static. They are ongoing and fluid. We believe in fostering opportunities for students to improve their reading, writing, thinking, and speaking abilities in ways that prepare them to more fully understand power, oppression, equity, and how they might lift their voice for positive change. We believe students should have access to enabling texts that are culturally and socially relevant and tasks that are robust and engaging. We also believe to enact change, we must examine our own biases and develop knowledge of our world by exploring multiple perspectives. So to that end, we pledge to create brave spaces that honor individual and collective journeys, to interrogate our beliefs as they pertain to pedagogy, curriculum, and school policies. We also pledge to facilitate courageous conversations and to push our growing edge. If you are interested in starting these conversations in your school or district, please see the link below for the works that have inspired us, and we thank you.
And thanks to our colleague, Dr. Rosalyn Shahid for narrating. I also just want to quickly shout out Christy, Nancy, and Sarah for being here today. Thank you as well. I saw that your chat just came through. Some familiar names again, so we appreciate that. Some working agreements today, or I'm sorry, some rationales today. I was ahead of myself. Our rationales for today and all 6 sessions in this series have been pretty similar. Our goal today is to help teachers, and throughout the series, is to help teachers, coaches, and school leaders co-construct culturally relevant literacy communities with the MESA 4-5 and 612 Literacy Essentials at the center. We also hope to use Dr. Kimberly Parker's Literacy is Liberation to empower teachers, coaches, school leaders to build intentional, abundant literacy communities where each student's strengths are recognized, their funds of knowledge are valued, and their identities are honored, and where they can find joy as readers and writers. Again, we're hoping to infuse that element of joy today. And finally, applying literacy as liberation and the literacy essentials to repair any harm that's been done to students as readers and writers, honor and value student, family, and community ways of knowing, to develop abundant opportunities for culturally relevant reading, writing, and learning, and supporting youth voices and normalizing high expectations for all students. This last one's particularly important, particularly about repairing and preventing harm. These literacy essentials emerged out of the Detroit literacy lawsuit that was filed by Jamaria Hall and his classmates. And, we think that's a really important point to remember and know as we explore the essentials today, and as you may explore them beyond today. This is really an attempt to repair and address literacy harm and injustice that's been done. Working agreements today, engage in humble inquiry. That's always a big one. We all have a lot to learn, we know that. Second is commit to being present today, including taking care of yourself and anybody else here as needed. We are a community, we are here for each other. We only have 75 minutes, as I mentioned, so we're going to embrace some non-closure. We're not going to be able to cover it all today, but if you do want to know more, please reach out to us. We're always available to you. That's why Reese is here. And then we'll all take a learner stance, and I think there's always something to gain for anything that we go to and attend and talk through. All right. We wanted to just review this series really quick. So if you've been with us, great. Like I said, it's good to see some familiar names and faces. We appreciate you hanging out with us on Tuesdays and Thursdays for the last couple of weeks. This has really been the first time that we've offered some dedicated days to secondary learning and secondary instructors. So we hope to be able to continue offering this kind of programming in the future. If you're new here, welcome. You are part of a growing network, and we're really glad that you're here, and we're more complete now that you're here. So thanks for being with us. In this series, Rosalyn, Laura, Jennifer, and I have really asked you to consider your philosophical beliefs, your daily practices and pedagogies, and the smaller interactions that you might have with students one-on-one. And we asked you to consider those things in an effort to help you grow your cultural responsiveness. Well, we worked on also growing our cultural responsiveness. As I said before, it's all about starting where we are, but it's about not staying there. This effort really has been driven by three key elements. First, engaging students with unconditional positive regard. Remembering that students have assets and that they're human beings worthy of our care. The second is providing us with the beliefs, strategies, and mindsets that we'll need to meet the current moment in education and normalize high expectations and excellent outcomes for all of our students. And thirdly, thinking about how to be even more trauma-informed as we've negotiated and our students have negotiated, and we and our students continue to negotiate multiple crises across our country and the world. We've learned so much from you and your sharing across these 6 series if you've been with us, and we hope that you've taken something with us from us. In the opening session, I suggested that in this series, you might find some edges and tensions, and that's a natural part of this work on self and on systems. So we're going to ask you to just take a quick moment to yourself, again, to lean in. If you've been with us before, it might be worthwhile to think about the edges and tensions that you've confronted and how you've navigated them throughout this series to think about how you're going to be even more culturally responsive and identity affirming this year. If you're new and joining us for the first time, again, welcome, and think about what edges and tensions that you might encounter as we go throughout this session, and if you watch any of the others. and set some intentions to lean into rather than away from those edges. So I'll give you a second to think here as we explore what we've done. All right. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Laura. We just said we're going to talk about joy and purpose. And I think now's the time to talk about joy and purpose. So Laura is going to take us away. Here you go.
Hi, everyone. We're going to use a protocol called Think, Ink, and Share. So I'm going to just give you a couple of minutes to think, a little longer to ink. So we'll take maybe a total of 4 minutes. So I want you to reflect on a time that you felt both joy and purpose in your writing. Think about who was present, what the conditions were like, and what led to you feeling as though your writing was both meaningful and satisfying. So just think about that for a second. And as you reflect, I want you to also take note of the quote from Anderson: "A person who feels appreciated will always do more than is expected." So just kind of have that rolling around in your head. Jot down, just a minute or two to think, a minute or two to ink, and then we'll take some time to share. So we'll give you 4 minutes starting right now. And please do feel free to use the chat as a way to capture some of your thinking. I see that Nancy's done that. And if that's a safe place for you to do so, add your thoughts to the chat, but we can also just unmute and share. We've got about maybe a minute and a half left. So I'm just looking at the chat, and we've got Nancy expressing that her family was present. That's, who was present. Felt that her writing really reflected her thoughts and feelings. Peter has added a time that I felt purposeful and full of joy was when I wrote a song for my wife's birthday. It's so beautiful. Both of you are tapping into that purpose. You had a specific purpose you were writing, and you had an audience. You had a group that you wanted to express something to, your feelings in some way or another. So definitely, I think that's just such a, we forget that sometimes when we're giving students writing assignments. We forget, is there a purpose in an audience that's not only authentic, but meaningful to them? And then we've got, Sarah, who added, I'm having trouble scrolling. I think I know my problem here. Let me get rid of the participant tab here. Being in 7th grade and a teacher complimenting your writing. That is so, Sarah, that's my same experience. I was in 8th grade and I remember that to this day, Mrs. Genova complimenting my writing. I will never forget it because it changed the trajectory of my interests, the way I address school. So again, not only the purpose and the audience, but someone giving you positive feedback and reinforcing that moment in your writing life. And then Joseph added writing something just so emotional, but having to put those thoughts into words for somebody that you respected and loved. You wanted to reflect on a life well lived. So again, purpose, audience, something that was going to be important to you as a writer. And Angela, I think too, how important it is for us to show that writing isn't easy. It never will be. I was just sharing with Jeff before you guys got on that I'm working on something and it's a hot mess. And I know I have a deadline, but I'm going to get it done. And it might not be the best, but that's part of writing. It's messy and it's scary and it's unsettling at times, but we can, share that with students, and it does add that element of joy. Meaning, an impetus to work harder And Christy added about a paper in economics. And it's interesting that you took a subject that you weren't that interested in, but you put a spin on it that was interesting to you. And I think that's part of giving our students choice. We want to open them up to making something about that writing assignment their own. And Jeff and I have talked about this a few times. We also have to be comfortable with that sense of choice. We were working with a group this morning. We said, you know, there's some people who will say, just pick anything you want to write about, but there's other people who would never feel comfortable with that. So you craft a choice within, you know, kind of a more finite space. You know, maybe there's 15 choices or 20, but you find that comfort level. So what I want you to think about is that each of you also, in telling me something that made you feel joyful and purposeful in your writing, told me something about you. I learned a little bit about your identity. And if we look at the next slide, we know that joy and purpose feeds identity. I confess to those of you who were with us on Tuesday that I have a very deep love for Dr. Goldie Mohammed. But she says identity is who you say you are, who others say you are, and who you desire to be. So think about how intricately tied that identity piece is part of who we are, what we talk about, what our interests are, what we write about. Dr. Parker, who, you know, has been foundational to this particular series, says that remember the goal is to have a complex, multi-stranded understanding of who our students are and how experiences were central to their positive literacy identities. But not only in the past, in the present too, we are in control of giving them positive or contributing to their positive literacy identity. And finally, I'm probably saying this name wrong, but Haddix tells us that students cannot be exempt from the identity of a writer, of writer, even if they see themselves as a bad writer. And a lot of students do identify themselves that way. And I always tell them, I was, you know, more of a freshman in college. That was the majority of my teaching experience. But I would say, my goal this semester is to change your mind about that. I am going to hope that even if you move from bad to okay, that you see yourselves as a better writer than when you walk through these doors. So we're all writers. From there, we move forward. So if we think about the literacy essentials and we talk about those, we want to think about these pieces. We've got, you know, a group of bloggers, really. They call themselves True Writing Teachers, but there's actually quite a few of them. But they talk about just what are these factors that contribute to the identity of a student writer or any writer, really. So it's choice and agency, a real audience, ownership, a sense of enjoyment, time to write every day. And then we fold in that essential instructional practice around writing, intentional and standards aligned writing. But again, we want to bring in choice, agency, ownership, audience, purpose, and most important, joy. We want to make that part of the experience. It can't be every single time. Every writing assignment and every writing experience cannot be perfect, but we want to move them successively towards more joy and satisfaction in what they've produced. And that goes back to that individual knowledge of our students, because if we know we just need to move this particular student in this direction, someone else might have a different direction to move in. That's okay. Each of them will experience growth that's unique. And that's what we help them do by knowing them. All right, so when we look at the essentials, I want you to just think about the bullets themselves as being kind of our guide, right? So we say intentional and standards aligned instruction in disciplinary writing, and we say to ourselves that we as teachers want to establish compelling reasons for writing and communicating. And then on the next slide, if we look at another bullet, we want to make sure that we provide opportunities to study models and write a variety of texts for a variety of purposes and audiences. But we want to remember that those models don't necessarily need to be professional, publications. Our students give us models. We can give our students models, and we can give them authentic reasons to engage in writing. And again, remember, this can't be all the time, right? Every single assignment can't be perfectly crafted so it checks all the boxes. Sometimes they're writing to reflect. Sometimes they're writing an exit ticket. Of course, those have purposes and audiences, but I'm just saying you might not be able to align it with that they're writing a letter to the principal to change policy or to the guidance counselor to create a new club. It won't always be something, I guess, on a larger scope, but we can think about these opportunities. And the more opportunities we give them to write, the more comfortable they are with writing, the more confident they are as writers, and the better their writing gets. So it's like more is more, I guess. We'll go against the grain. And then the next bullet says, and this one was from the ELA group, but it says provide students with practice in writing in different modalities, registers, voices, rhetorical styles. We want to remember that text is very broad. We can't think of text as just printed words on a page. We have blogs, we have videos, we have podcasts, we have signs, we have infographics, the list goes on and on. So we want to give them an opportunity to engage in writing from, just a broad range of what we consider text to be. Just this morning in the group that we were working with, the visual arts teacher talked about the communication of just the photographs and paintings and different art forms that they were studying in that class. I'm like, it's text. It communicates an idea to an audience. It's got a purpose. So that helps us kind of think about that a little bit more broadly, like I said. And then when we put them all together, we think about, writing for authentic audiences that can even include self. Oh, sorry, Jeff, it's on the very next slide. So we can look at self, peers, community members, and other public audiences. So sometimes we are the audience. In a few of these cases, you were part of the audience that you were sharing your meaningful piece with, that we have different purposes, and you outline many different purposes in the chat that you wrote for a reason. But on our end, we have to help guide some of this. We have to give them some guidance in those discipline-specific writing processes, strategies, and conventions. So I'm literacy. I think I've got it down. I know most of the ways my students are going to write. I feel pretty comfortable teaching them the text features, the genres. I give them, some choice and range, etc. I'm not familiar with the ways that scientists communicate or mathematicians, but those of you who are teaching other disciplines are going to want to think about that. Today, again, I keep going back to this, but it was interesting. Some of the things they said tied into this afternoon, but one of the teachers shared that she teaches math, and she has the kids reflectively write about the story problems. What is this problem actually asking me to do? What are the things in this problem that will help me solve what it's asking me to solve? So it's just a moment to use writing to process, and then to model not only that story problem, the reflection around one, but then be able to write one. So there's a whole strategy or a series of strategies that teacher uses to get them closer to thinking, writing, and talking like a mathematician. So what does this look like for real? I'm going to hand it over to Jeff because he's going to guide us in giving us things that attach to these words.
I'm so glad you went through those essential practices because, I think that they can be a little daunting if we're not sure about them. But, the way I think you just broke them down, and I'm thinking about when I first learned about them, and I was teaching high school, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this document is, there's things here. And a lot of it was affirming, and some of it was challenging or inviting. But like, I think the way that you broke it down would really have helped me go, okay, like, what are we really talking about here? Like, what does this really mean? How can I really think about this? And that's why we thought it was important to talk about like writing. What does it mean to write for real in the secondary grades? So before moving ahead, I do want to flash back to some foundational stances for writing teachers and their students that Laura shared during Tuesday's presentation, and then brought up again a couple of slides back. And these come from Dr. Marcel Haddix, who's at Syracuse University. And the article that we lifted these from is called What's Radical About Youth Writing? Seeing and Honoring Youth Writers and Their Literacies. I think that's a really valuable piece. It's a piece that has informed me a lot as a teacher, both of English and of social studies in my career. And I think that that's just, incredibly helpful to think about. So Haddix says, that writing teachers must practice writing themselves. Again, everybody has that identity as a writer. We're all writers, even if we're, bad writers or reluctant writers, we still have writing identities. And I liked what Laura said too, just about like, writing with our students, being co-writers, making it. And I think you said this on Tuesday too. It's tempting when students are writing to say like, this is when I'll get some of that work done. But, making time to write with them is really critical. Making space for students to write often and what they choose to write. And that goes back to giving them multiple opportunities, multiple modalities, multiple options, thinking broadly about text and writing and composing, not just as I'm writing this 5-paragraph essay, but all the other things that Laura mentioned, blogs, videos, infographic signs, lots going on there. And then honoring and respecting youth literacy practices, even when they might not align with our own. I think one of the goals of this series has been to expand our definitions of literacy and to be more inclusive of the ways that kids are practicing reading, writing, speaking, and listening. Kids are interacting with text broadly defined at rates that we could only have imagined, like when we were kids. So there's kind of this deluge, right, of text that they're interacting with. That can be hard. It means ceding a little control. It means not being at the center, but it's really important to do that work. Haddix also says that students must see themselves as readers and writers. A lot of the things that you lifted when Laura asked you about purpose and joy were things that helped you develop positive lifelong reading and writing identities. Some of them weren't even school related, right? But you were able to see yourself as a reader and a writer, and you were able to see that it mattered in some meaningful way. And not just because, it didn't matter just because, oh, I got a point higher on the ACT, right? It mattered because of the people that you were around and the way that you felt and the way that you were empowered and affirmed and valued. So those things were critical to you. She says we need to be in community with other writers, and students should have that capability and that opportunity. Another key point across all of these sessions has been that reading and writing are not solitary acts, but they're communal acts. I think we sometimes see writing as like, oh, I'm an individual genius pumping this thing out on a page, right? But really, it does take a village to write. And then students need to write in volume, as Laura was saying, multiple genres, multiple purposes, multiple audiences. And they're going to need to write in a volume that is greater than we could ever assess. So that's why those choice writing spaces are really important. Okay, so all of this asks us to consider the assignments that we're giving to students. Heather Latimer, who's a great thinker, wrote a book called Real World Literacies, which is, I think, a really amazing book to check out. tells us that students need to write for real. Our assignments need to be renewable and not disposable. So that means the assignments need to live beyond Google Classroom or Schoology, and they need to live into our communities. And Laura and I said, it was really important that we provided you with some exemplars of like, what does this look like to write for real? I liked what Laura said a couple of slides ago, and I want to build on it because what we're going to show you is deliberately, not high budget. It's not it doesn't have high production value all the time. These writing for real does not mean creating huge events, right? It does not mean spending thousands of dollars, bothering your principal for money they don't have, right? It doesn't mean any of that. So over the next few slides, our goal is to share some ideas with you that are implementable and doable, right? There's something you could take with you, right? And I also want to say that these go along with our core values that you heard in our literacy team video, that literacy is actionable. It's not something we have, it's something we do, and that it's evolving. So again, how we might think of literacy, that can change and grow. And as our definitions of literacy change and grow, so too will our students, and they will come to see themselves as more literate, and as having the positive reading and writing identities. So we know that that's important. You've all talked about that too in your work. So one of the first steps that we wanted to give you was something that I've used really successfully in my class, that my colleague and I have presented about at NCTE, and that is actually a feature at MCTE this year, the Michigan Council of Teachers of English Conference, which is Commonplace Books. So this is one renewable practice you can implement. Basically what Commonplace Books are, they are our composition notebooks that are ungraded choice writing spaces that ask students to combine writing and image. Students can use Commonplace Books for a variety of different reasons. And by the way, this stretches beyond English. I'm going to be talking to a group about Commonplace Books on Monday. That is English, social studies, math, and science. And so they're thinking about how this could be used to write for real together, right? So students can use Commonplace Books to keep ideas. They can use them to develop arguments. They can try out a new form of poetry or a new genre of writing. One of the things that I also appreciate that Laura brought up is getting students opportunities to write outside their comfort zones is really critical in ways that won't punish them or make them feel like they failed, or some of those other barriers. And that's another really great thing about the Commonplace Books. It reduces typical barriers to writing, anxiety about needing to be correct, or about needing to have everything right, or about feeling like they're in the varsity spotlight. It also allows students to share their thoughts about school and class, so it's a social emotional component. I've had students write fan fiction about their favorite shows, and then I've had students do some interesting things about whatever was crossing their mind. In other words, Commonplace Books are those spaces where students can write in volume across multiple genres, and in doing so, hopefully develop positive relationships with writing. And you can actually see some real life examples from my former students, shared with their permission, of course, that they've done. And this is just time spent in class that they've dedicated to writing and creating. Commonplace, as I was mentioning before, Commonplace Books are great ways for you and your students to develop relationships with each other, and for students to develop relationships with their classmates. So sometimes I would ask students to choose pieces they wanted me to read, and with their okay, we would carry on a dialogue in the margins, right? Oh, this is really interesting. what made you think about this? Oh, well, here's what made, right? This shifted my relationships with students straight away. I was not the writing cop. And I was a teacher. I'm not a police officer. I didn't want to be a police officer. I want to be a teacher. So instead, we were just talking. I was just another person cultivating their genius, right? And then a few times per term, we'd have stories, not stuff days, where students would share what they wrote, kind of open mic style, coffee house style, while their classmates provided a willing and enthusiastic audience. And this helped establish that community of writers, which, again, as Haddock said, is really important to their development. So that's one tool, Commonplace Books, that you could use, one strategy. Another step is to do community advocacy projects. Laura was talking about some of these. This can't be every time, right? Not everything can be a community advocacy assignment, but it might be something you plan for once or twice a term, right? That you're having students write in it for advocacy purposes. So it's not always going to align, but sometimes it will. I think engaging students in community advocacy work in ethical and responsible ways is really a key to developing renewable assignments, or at least one of the keys. One of the questions that I always like to start the year with, and I kind of stole this from Ernest Morel, which is a good person to steal from, I think, if you're going to steal things. I'd ask my students, how do you want to reimagine and reshape your corner of the world this year? And actually, this was their first entry in their Commonplace book. And some students were like, I have 50 ways I want to change the world. And some students were like, I have no idea, because nobody's ever asked. So the research and importance on the importance of purpose, as Laura was talking about earlier, is really clear. When students are doing relevant, meaningful work aligned with their goals, there's more motivation and engagement to do and carry through with hard tasks. Students will be at different places with this kind of work. Some will have, like I said, big ideas, big frameworks, and some may find the question of, again, reimagining and reshaping a little bit difficult. So having structures in place to support learners is key. And if you're interested in doing more community advocacy work in your class, please feel free to reach out to me. This is a big passion of mine, and I can help you through it. I want to briefly touch on some of the projects that you see on the screen. The image that reads, "Why is my water bill so high?" is an interesting idea that comes from the Pulitzer Center's work in Chicago. And they found that water bills in neighborhoods that were Black and Latinx, that they were higher than that which was happening in white neighborhoods. So they wanted to inform and engage the residents and in working toward a solution to those problems. And so they made cards with QR codes in both English and Spanish and passed them out to residents. I think this is a great model for kids to do similar work within the context of your school, within the context of your city, within the context of your region. I also want to point out the Girls Who Code image at the bottom, as coding isn't just a great way to build career skills, but it's also a great way to impact change and solve problems. As a quick example, I knew a student who was using coding to develop a chat bot that could help answer questions about the college application process, as they wanted to make applying to college a more open and accessible process for their peers. These projects might not be what first comes to mind when we think about writing, but they do ask students to compose for multiple purposes and for multiple audiences in multiple genres. And I think it really highlights what it means to write for real, this community advocacy work. On that note, these assignments also meet the definition of renewable, in that they ask students to do purpose-aligned work that lives beyond the gradebook and lives into the community. And then one last thing that I wanted to share with you is this idea of youth-led and youth-centered writing spaces. Among the common threads across today's presentation, and really all 6 presentations in this series, is that helping students organize to do meaningful, liberating work together is at the heart of identity affirming, equity-driven, justice-seeking instruction. Removing obstacles, facilitating groups, locating resources, and helping students think through processes are just a few of the important roles that teachers play in helping students write for real every day. During my teaching career, one of the most successful events I held was called a write-in. And during the write-in, students would write in many different forms about social change during our lunch periods. Some students would write poems, others would write letters to school and elected officials, and some, because we all have video recorders in our pocket, some would produce short videos about topics that matter to them. If students wanted, we shared their work, including sending the advocacy letters to administrators and community decision makers, or posting their videos, or sending their videos to people who they wanted them sent to. What's most interesting about this project is that students just needed space, time, and a little encouragement to form community and to write for real. As I said before, we're interested in solutions that can kind of be taken and implemented quickly, and without much cost. This write-in cost me basically stamps and snacks, and it was relatively easy to plan. I got with some students, we brainstormed, and then after about maybe 45 minutes of brainstorming, we had it kind of set up and ready to go. But I think the results demonstrated the depth and breadth of student genius and their writing achievement and all the literacy that they have inside of them. Even if the things that they produced didn't look maybe like the traditional 5-paragraph essay or a claim evidence reasoning template. Again, those things may have their value and their place, but writing for real demands that we think a little bit beyond those things. Laura brought this up before, but you have to do what's comfortable for you, right? And the whole basis of this series has really been start where you are, but don't stay there. And we took that from Dr. Rich Milner. Dr. Milner's quote reminds us of the power in dreaming big and doing small in the name of sustainable operational change. If we're going for the big blockbuster projects all the time to write for real, I don't know that that's sustainable. I think we're going to burn ourselves out. I think we may even burn our students out doing that. But Laura and I love this graphic because it demonstrates that you can travel to more youth-centered, youth-led writing spaces in your classroom and beyond. Listen, maybe you're not going to get to the deep end free inquiry part of the pool this year. And that's okay. But maybe you can, if you're in the shallow end, maybe you can start to move toward that medium depth. And by the way, it's okay to start with an assignment. It's okay to start with a unit. That's progress, right? You don't need to hold all, you don't need to uplift and uproot everything you're doing. And hopefully this is affirming a lot of your practices. But maybe you're also ready to make the move into the deep end. And that's something that we can celebrate too. If you're already in the deep end of the pool and you're doing free inquiry, let's think about how we can push even farther. Let's think about the next steps there. Whatever the most elegant next step is for you, whatever the smallest changes that can make the biggest impact, this is the year, this is the time, this is the space to make it. What we do know, and actually we were just talking about this yesterday, what we do know is that we cannot go into this school year like we've gone into other school years. There's a lot of mourning that's happened. We've brought up the crises that we're all experiencing, some disproportionately, but we are not going to ever go back to February 2020. it's gone. It's not happening. So, I know that we're wishing for normalcy. We lifted that, but there's a new normal. And so we have to think about what that new normal is going to look like. I'm going to turn things actually back over to Laura now. And she is going to talk about how you and your students might reimagine and reshape writing in your classes this year. And she's going to help us think through this with a quick protocol that she likes. So, Laura, turn back over to you.
Thank you. And I've got you ready to go into some short breakout rooms, because I know we have so much to tell you. An hour is never enough. It's like I don't know what our collective years of experience would be, but we've got that much to tell you in 60 minutes. But I want you to consider the writing assignments that you include in the units that you teach, whatever content area your lens is, and then take a minute to reflect on one small change that you think is going to yield the greatest results over these 2 sessions. And I know some of you are at both, or even just today's session. We gave you a lot to think about. We gave you purpose, audience, genre, spaces for writing, assessment for writing. So just one small change that you think is going to yield the greatest results this year. And we're just going to give you a minute of quiet reflection, and then I'm going to put you into your groups. Think to what steps would you need to take to enact that change this year?
And remember, it's okay to dream big, but act small, right? It's okay to have big aspirations, but think about what's in your capacity this year. Think about all the things that you've endured over the last couple years, and think about what you can do. Because that's really important. Again, this is a judgment-free zone.
Hopefully that gave you a minute to consider that small change and some steps that you'll take. We're going to put you into groups of either 3 or 4, and we'll have you in those groups for about, I'll say about 8 minutes. We'll see you back then. Welcome back, everyone. We would love to hear that one small change. If anyone would like to unmute and share, what is your one small change? There's such a small group of us together today. So if you just want to go around quickly, unmute and let us know.
One of the small changes that I'm going to do is, and we talked about this a little bit, is reincorporate the writing, like the commonplace writing. We have been, like Jeff said, that February 2020 is gone. So we went straight to doing everything on a computer, and there's kids that don't like that all the time. So I think giving them that freedom to write and back to paper, pencil, or markers or gel pens will really help. So I think I want to go back to that paper pencil activity and give them some freedom. So I think that will really help encourage them.
I love that. And don't forget that some kids like to sketch even first. They don't want to necessarily write anything out. They've got to get their thoughts out in different ways. Thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, I was in Sarah's group as well, and we were both talking about the Commonplace book. I'd never heard it referred to in that way, but I was saying that I had incorporated a lot more digital writing last year just because of dysgraphia seems to be quite prevalent. But I'd love to incorporate maybe just one day a week of a Commonplace book where kids can doodle alongside their traditional kind of writing. And Sarah was commenting, and I would agree that so many kids are so into artistic expression. There's so much, artistic ability out there that they're constantly wanting to express. So I thought that that would be a good opportunity to do that as well.
I love that. And that's, that's that choice and voice coming in, loud and clear, is just giving them room to be the kind of writer that they want to be and prep for the kind of writing that they want to do. Thank you. And I see Joseph added incorporating multimedia presentations as opposed to just traditional writing pieces. And you're going to, see that some kids just shine in these different capacities. They have a talent for design and sound and text and color, and that's where they shine. So it gives them that opportunity. Thank you, all three of you. Anyone else? I know we're getting close to our end.
I just want to say that when I was using Commonplace Books, 1 day a week was a great strategy. It gave me a little time to breathe. It gave kids a little time to breathe. It was just very, very helpful. I saw that Nancy unmuted, but I just want to say that was my approach too, and it worked out pretty well. So Nancy, sorry.
Oh, no, that's okay. I had just mentioned that one of the subjects, I teach GED, so when I teach math, I would really like to start having the students create their own word problems for the class to solve. So they'd have to do some writing with the math after they learn a particular concept.
I love that. I guess it's just the perfect time right now. Here it is, August 8th. What do we want to do? And how can we make it happen? And I just, I love these ideas. And I think there might be someone else still that we have missed, and feel free to share, but also don't feel pressure.
I would just like to say that I also like the Commonplace Books idea, the free writing. Most of my kids don't like to write at all. So it's just a struggle. And I think giving them time, hopefully that would, I wasn't thinking once a week. I was thinking every day, but I really like once a week much better, because I think it would just be, it'd be a lot for them, especially in the beginning, because they're so reluctant to put pen to paper. And anyway, kind of like a free writing type thing. So something small. I really did like that idea.
Yeah, and that you could do it every day. I was my students were just a small sample size, obviously, and then one group, but they preferred having like extended time to actually to write, rather than here's 10 minutes today and 5 minutes, right, or whatever. They liked having the block and the chunk of time to just be with it. And we would do, like I said, some other things with it, some sharing, some gallery walking, some stories not stuff. So there were other sort of offshoots. And it also gave me time to just kind of, sit next to students and do, do a little informal conferencing. Oh, what are you writing about? Like, what's going on? Oh, what made you think of that? Or, wow, that's great. Where are you going next with what you're writing? And so it was that great informal check-in time. The room had a good vibe. It had it had a good bounce, had a good tone, had a good pace. So it was kind of cool to see how it got rolling. Obviously it doesn't start that way. And by the way, if you're interested in kind of like seeing an assignment or like the things that I gave to students to, like, what's a Commonplace book? You can feel free to email me and I can send that out to you and kind of show you that. Anyway, I know we're at time, so I just want to thank everybody for sharing. Go ahead, Laura. Turn it back over to you.
Well, yes, and I know that every time we've been together, we've added these links in, and just on the off chance that someone is new to our group for today, the first link that I put in was to our equity based disciplinary literacies network. That particular group is going to meet once a month throughout the school year for an hour, virtual. So we would love to have you, join us, because this is an opportunity for us to continue learning, to continue thinking about the literacy habits and future lives of our secondary students. And the next one is our Equity Leaders series. And as Jeff has said, it's star-studded. So even if you only make one, there's just a lot of good stuff in that series. So thank you so much for spending, I think some of you, six consecutive hours with us. We really appreciate it. We've enjoyed it, and wish you the very best school year ahead. 2022 is going to be a good year.
Thanks, everyone, and enjoy your evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. You too.